I was out of the hospital less than 5 days. Yo, Rabbi. Shabbos. Shabbos.
Yep.
How was your meeting?
Rick Jacobs, the president of the Reform Movement, and Andrew Rayfeld, the president of the Green Scholar Belt.
That's good.
And us.
You're a monster.
It was pretty cool.
Really? I'm glad you went.
Oh yeah.
Carl Magoya was fabulous.
What's that? He was?
Yeah, he was great. I mean, I've done it since I was a kid.
You say he wants to donate to Bethel?
No, but he donated the idea.
Oh, okay.
And he said he was all about Israel and all about how much Israel meant to him and his friends. It's nice to have people in the community that should really be. I like the idea of giving it to someone who's not good at it.
Not every community has that. In fact, most don't.
We have this, and I don't know if you're going to be able to make it, these families that are coming to our office for AJC.
Who's that?
Hostage family.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I think I have something going on this afternoon. Is it in the morning?
It's in the afternoon.
I saw that. I think I have a conflict.
If you don't, please come.
I would like to.
Because I've been to a couple of them. They're really heart-wrenching.
Yeah, I've met a bunch of these things. I think I have a conflict, but I'll speak
Okay.
again. It's hard to get downtown.
I know. I'll take you home. You get down. Huh? Wells Fargo building. You know the thing about it, we have 2 floors. Mind the office. If there are 8 lawyers there, like 50 lawyers, everybody is learning to work with law. That.
So what is in your women's commentary then?
Yeah, it affects the cap rate. It's like, well, who's making? Men and out of Kenny. We were in that building early. We were right after Greenwood. New York let us had enough of it. COVID's over. You come back 4 days a week, come up to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You work the other day, work remotely. We went to the office, we went to the office. And they got parts. Come back. There's no way you can mentor another lawyer. Most professors have a special component. When you don't see people in the office, you're by yourself, you don't have but
I like that Sherry's she has this one.
involved. My apartment's too small. I'd rather be in the office.
Shabbat Shalom. Here we go.
What?
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael
Et Shabbat.
L'asor לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת Sheshet Yamim Asa Adonai, Asa Adonai, Es HaShamayim ve'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat Lasod et HaShabbat Ledorotam berit olam Uvayom HaShvi Shabbat v'nafash Shabbat v'nafash Shabbat v'nafash v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat Lasod et HaShabbat Ledorotam berit olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Bayrei b'riah gafen Amen L'chaim.
Please yesterday for Hanukkah.
All right. Blessing for Torah study.
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam
haolam,
Asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Amen.
I'm here because Bill can't make it.
Oh, okay.
He had a fall.
Is he okay?
He's okay. They had a brazen skin and it was still looking.
Hey. Okay, good to see everyone. We are up to Vayishlach, chapter 35 of Genesis, verse 9. Chapter 35, verse 9. So, if I were ever to want to write a book about Torah, what I would want to write about, knowing me, as you might, I would want to write a book about the Zionist themes in the book, in the Torah, but specifically in Genesis. The idea that, Herzl was the first Zionist. He was, the first Zionist of his time. But the idea of Jews not living in Israel, but wanting to live in Israel, goes back a lot further. It starts with Abraham when God says, Lech lecha, get up from where you are and go to Israel. And so then Abraham does that and goes there and runs into challenges. And then later on, Isaac actually does not have the same challenges. Isaac is the only of the matriarchs and patriarchs who lives his entire life in Israel. Every single day of his life is in Israel. In fact, he tries to go to the border once, and his passport is revoked. And they tell him, you can't go across the border. I think I told you once, probably, the story of my friend Rabbi Hammer, who lives in Israel and who leaves Israel a lot to raise money, but it was once at Ben Gurion Airport with a man who'd never left Israel. You heard the story? So this guy, Rabbi Hammer, who grew up in Brooklyn, lives in Israel, comes to speak a lot. That's why his accent is so hard to understand, because he grew up in Brooklyn.
We try it again.
I just tell you, I go to a lot of Israeli speakers. And you get so excited. This guy, every one of them, was at Entebbe, is the head of the Mossad, was Rabin's right aide, whoever it is. And you get so excited and all day, and within 30 seconds of him beginning, you realize you can barely understand a word that he's saying, and it's like, what is this? I don't know if you've ever had that experience. I have it a couple times a week. Okay, so Rabbi Hammer was once at Ben Gurion Airport, He was coming to America to raise money for one of the, important charities that he raises money for. And he was sitting there next to a very older Hasidic-looking fellow. And they started talking. And the man was very old. And he said to my friend, Rabbi Hammer, he said, my whole life, this is the first time I'm ever leaving the borders of Israel. And Rabbi Hammer said, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I leave all the time. Sometimes I feel like Israel's closing in on me. Sometimes I feel like Israel's so small that Israel's too small for me and I just got to get away. And the man looked at Rabbi Hammer and he said, sometimes I feel that I'm too small for the land of Israel. It's good, right? So, that was Isaac. Isaac was, I can't leave the land of Israel. Now, Jacob is now outside the land of Israel because he has 20 years of living with Laban, and all he wants to do is get back. And he finally gets back and he says, okay, I'm back. This is great. I'm going to live out the rest of my life in the land of Israel. And then, so I don't want to ruin it for you. But there's a story that comes along later about Joseph. And Jacob ends up having to leave Israel again under the worst circumstances, thinking his son is dead. And then he leaves and he finds out. And he dies in Egypt. And his only dream of settling in Israel is short-lived and doesn't play out. And so the one figure who you might call the real Zionist, besides Abraham, if we look at Zionism as not the coming to fruition of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, which you could say has come true, but as of 1948 and especially 1967, but if you would say, yeah, but Zionism is also really the struggle of getting back to Israel and maintaining a Jewish homeland for the Jewish people in Israel, then that's Jacob. Because Jacob represents that struggle. He's there, all he wants to do is get back. He gets back and he gets kicked out again, and all he wants to do is get back, and this time he doesn't get back until he's dead. And then they bring him and bury him there. But as he's going back now, and he's trying to get back, and the struggle is for something called Israel, the angel comes to him and says, not so fast, I'm not going to let you. The angel of Esau comes back and says, I'm not going to let you march in so fast. And ultimately, he's able to prevail in that battle and says, I'm not going to let you, the angel, go until you give me a blessing. And that blessing becomes, well, then you're going to be called Israel. Okay? But is he really called Israel? So I want to show you something amazing, and then see if it can lead us on a fascinating journey, and we'll see where we go. So if you'll begin with me now in Genesis chapter 35, beginning with verse 9. Well, I know what you're thinking, by the way, which is that why do we always have to, why is this always such an advanced class? Why can't we just do the basics? Well, you gave up on that dream 10 years ago when I first got it. No, it's coming. It's called Bethel University. So if you haven't signed up yet, go to the website and sign up. And if you've mastered the Torah, then you can take one of the other classes. 35-9. 35-9. Richard?
233. Sitting here, listening to what you just said about Jacob leaving Esau to Laban, leaving Laban back to Esau, and then leaving to Joseph. This struggle, this journey. Yes, this
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay. Norman, would you, everyone, verse 9, here we go. We have a few minutes left. Let's keep.
God appeared to Jacob again on his return from Padan Aram and blessed him. God said to him, Jacob is your name, but Jacob are you called no more, for Israel is your name. Thus God named him Israel. And God said to him, I am El Shaddai, be fruitful and multiply. A people and a host of peoples shall come from you, and kings shall go forth from your loins. And the land that I gave to Abraham and to Isaac I will give to you, and to your descendants after you I will give the land. And the presence of God ascended from him at that sacred site where God had spoken to him. Jacob set up a monument in that sacred site where God had spoken to him, a pillar of stone. He then poured out a libation upon it and anointed it with oil. Jacob named the place where God had spoken to him Bethel.
Okay. That was extraordinary. You missed it. You missed it. You missed it. All right, you missed it. You missed it. Who wrote this? Who wrote this stuff? Who wrote it? Moses. I mean, if you believe in that kind of thing. Yeah. Maybe other people wrote it. But someone wrote it. And he said, you'll no longer be called Jacob, you'll now be called Israel. Okay, great. Here's the blessings. Verse 14. And Jacob. Why doesn't it say and Israel? You will now be called Israel. Hi, my name's Israel. Oh, hi, Jacob. And if that's not enough, if 14 wasn't enough, how about 15? Then Jacob called. So do you think Moses was sitting there and said, okay, you're now going to be called Israel? And then God said, okay, Moses, here's the next verse. The next verse is, and Jacob set up a pillar. So Moses is writing and said, well, wait a minute. I thought you changed his name. So God probably said to Moses, just write what I'm telling. No, yeah, I don't know how it went with it. You know, if you're Moses, do you question God and say, you know, God, your grammar, if I had Grammarly, God, I would tell you some of your grammar is off. And God would look at him like, you know,
It is the grammar.
I am grammar. Like, what are you talking about? But don't you think whoever wrote this said, wait a minute, should I put Israel or should I put Jacob? You see the problem? How long does it take the Torah to immediately come back and say his name was changed to Israel, but sometimes we call him Jacob? Right? Does everyone see that? That's amazing, right? Okay, so now we see we have some issues. So I just want to show you before we go forward 3 Rashis on the sheet. One on verse 9, one on verse 10, and one on verse 11. Yeah, the first one, verse 9. Edith, would you mind reading the first one? They shall not.
They shall not be called any more Jacob, which means a man who comes as a lurker and trickster, but it shall be Israel, which signifies prince and chief.
Right, so first of all, remember, Jacob is not the most royal name. Jacob means heel, because you were holding the heel of Esau as you came out of the womb. That's it. Jacob is, Yaakov and Akev is a heel. So the name, here's what really just happened. The angel is the angel of Esau. Jacob, by definition, listen closely, Jacob by definition is subservient to Esau. His name means you're holding on to his heel. You're subservient. I'm now flipping that and saying your blessing is you're no longer subservient, you're now the prince. You're now the firstborn. That's what the blessing is. You're the firstborn. I think we talked about this. I don't know. I talked about this recently. That's why he ends up marrying Leah, because he's now the older brother, so he marries the older sister. He marries Leah first. Right. Okay, so that's verse 9. That's the significance of the name change. You just went from being the subservient brother to the blessing is now you're the firstborn, you're the prince. Okay, verse 11, Edith, one more. A nation.
A nation and an assemblage of nations. This means that his sons are destined to become nations, the same in number as the nations of the ancient world, which was 70. So too, the whole Sanhedrin consisted of 70.
Okay, so Jacob, does anyone know? I actually just wrote, if you don't know this and you don't want to pay attention for the next 30 seconds, don't worry about it, because I just wrote my commentator article about this for next month, about this topic.
Well, if we listen, we don't have to read the article.
You can't lose. Yeah, I mean, you can't lose. The end of Genesis ends. Jacob comes down to Egypt, and there's 70 souls with him. That's it, 70 people. That's how Genesis ends. Exodus begins. There are so many Jews. Pharaoh is so worried about them that he needs to enslave them or else they'll overtake him. So you have to ask the question, what happened between the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus that we went from 70 Jews to roughly 1.2 million? Okay, so you don't need to worry about that, because if you just wait till January, you have my commentator article, and then you can see how, like everything, the thesis of that is, who cares? Sign up for Bethlehem University. Right. No, actually, it has a different message too. Yeah.
Is there
Here's the mic.
a dichotomy
Or not.
when God calls in Jacob and when he calls in Israel?
Yes. Okay. So we have to ask that question. It's a good point. We're going to get there. When does the Torah call him Jacob and why? And when does the Torah call him Israel and why? And we'll see that a little bit further. One of the things you'll see, Rebekah never referred to him as Jacob, because to Rebekah he was never the subservient one. It was Isaac who named him Jacob, not Rebekah. Yes, we're gonna jump back to that in a second. If you see, you know how you can see where I'm going. You see how the first 3 Rashis are on Genesis 35, and the next 3 are on Genesis 32, or the next 2? Yeah, next 3. That means we're gonna have to go back to Genesis 32 in order to understand this. So yes, we're gonna go back and take a look at that in a second. There's also the city was called Luz, and you know people who were from there were losers, right? Every year. Because the city's called Luz. All right. What was I talking about? Oh, okay, the 70. So Jacob comes down with 70 souls. However, one other thing we know about 70 is that there are 70 ancient nations of the ancient Near East, which means that the souls of all of the nations somehow came out of the Jewish people. And that's why on Sukkot, we offered the 70 sacrifices, one for each of the other nations. And we always say, you know, if the other nations realized that we offered sacrifices on their behalf and they would be blessed if they let us do our sacrifices, they would stop trying to destroy the Holy Temple. When they destroy the Holy Temple, they actually destroyed themselves. Blessing is a very interesting thing. You know, well, we'll get to, I'll tell you something amazing at the end. We'll get to this at the end. Okay, one more Rashi on verse 10, Edith. The third one on the sheet. I'm sorry, this is not a Rashi. This is a Nachmanides, the Ramban.
Thy name is Jacob, God is saying. Now you are still called Jacob, even though the Lord of Esau has changed your name, because he was not sent to you to change your name. Did I read that right?
Yeah, 100%.
However, from now on thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. This being the meaning of the end of the verse, and he called his name Israel. It may be that it alludes to the fact that he called his name Israel in addition to the name Jacob, but not that it be forbidden for him to be called Jacob.
This is an unbelievable Nachmanides. Look at what he just said. Have you ever talked about the idea that an angel can only do what an angel is sent to do? Have you heard this before? Every angel has a mission, and that angel can only do that mission. Now, by the way, if you go, when you go to heaven and you get up there, there's not a neighborhood where the angels live, right? There's no area you can't afford, and that's where they live, and you need like DNA to get in, a sample to get in past the guard. They don't have that. Why aren't the angels there? Angels. So what like let's say you're driving down the road and like if you're on a kibbutz, maybe you don't have this so much in Pinecrest, but if you're on a kibbutz, every home says Mishpachat Finkelstein. The Finkelstein family. They have a sign, and it's colorful, and there's whatever. Then you go to the next one, Schwartz. Whatever. Everyone has the name. So you go to the angels, and you think it's like, welcome to the abode of Raphael. And then the next home, here lives Michael, The angel only has their name for the moment they're doing the action. So God says, okay, I need an angel. It's going to be you. Here's your mission. Go heal Abraham from the circumcision. For the name of this mission, this is code name Raphael. Go heal him. But when you come back, you're not Raphael anymore.
So you never see that name again?
Never see it again. Well, maybe you'll get the same one again, but you're only that name while you're doing that act. When you go back up there, you're just back to angel. You don't have that name anymore. Yeah. Retired. Right. So you're only that angel for the moment that you're doing the action, and then you go back. So now this angel, the ministering angel of Esau, has a job to do, which is to go and wrestle with Jacob for the purpose of defending Esau or preventing Jacob from coming back to Israel. Whatever it is, what his mission was not is giving him the name, is changing his name. And the angel does not change his name. The angel doesn't change his name. How do I know that? Okay, now come back with me to chapter 32, verse 27. This is going to be cool. It's fun for me. You may think it's terrible, but I think it's really...
32 what?
32:27. Okay, Judy, would you mind reading that? Everyone, chapter 32 of Genesis, beginning verse 27.
Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me."
Okay, now what we know so far is that he's there to give him, to wrestle with him. He's not there to bless him. Even if he wanted to bless him, even if he wanted to change his name, he doesn't have that power, because that's not why he's there. So he can't do it. But watch what happens.
Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed." Jacob asked, "Pray tell me your name." But he said, "You must not ask my name." And he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, meaning I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved.
Okay, so here you would say also, if his name was actually changed to Israel, why wouldn't the author in verse 31 say, so Israel, called the name? Because that's who he is now. But Hebrew and tense and grammar are extremely important here. So there's one word I just want to point out in verse 29. Vayomer, and he said, Lo Yaakov, Ye'amer. Ye'amer means passive tense, third person singular, future. In the future, this person will no longer be called Jacob. In the future, this is future tense. Not you are now Jacob, you are now Israel. Not I've now changed your name to Israel. You will in the future be called Israel. And the angel doesn't change his name because the angel can't change his name. But if you look in verse 35, verse 9, where we just were, hold your spot here because I want to come back to 32. But if you look in 32:10, who changes his name? God. The angel doesn't have the capacity, the power to change his name, but he says, I do have the capacity to know what's going to happen in the future. And in the future, what's going to happen is God's going to change your name. Well, when does God change his name? Not over there in chapter 32. Here in chapter 35. Look what happens in chapter 35, verse 10. Then God, so up until this point, all we know is an angel says, some point in the future your name's going to be changed. But I can't do it. I don't do that. But I think it's going to happen in the future.
Rabbi.
Okay, fast forward to verse 10. Then God said to him, it doesn't get any more definitive than this. Look at this. Then God said to him, your name right now is Jacob. Your name shall no longer be called Jacob. Israel is your name. He said, will be your name. But then it says, V'yikra Shmo Yisrael. And he called, past tense, his name, Israel. So I'm just pointing out, I'm not saying why yet. I'm just pointing out that the angel couldn't change the name. He just knew that it was going to happen. And when the name does get changed, it's not changed by the angel, it's changed by God. We haven't said why yet. I'm just pointing out what actually happened.
A different why. Why do the translators then, why have they missed this all along? We always get the
Who missed it?
Well, but the translation that we got from 32 was, the angel changed his name.
No, mine says shall.
Does it say shall?
Well, Plaid has problems. That's why I'm
Oh, your
writing a new
name
one.
shall no longer be. Well, shall sounds like it's.
You can donate to it if you want.
Yeah, it just seems.
Oh,
we've
so
not
I don't
changed
know about
people.
any translation in and of itself is a commentary, but what I can tell you is the Hebrew Ye'amer is third person singular future tense, passive. Bobby and then Paul.
Is this the first time God identifies himself as El Shaddai?
That's what I was going to ask.
Well, you should answer.
No, I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
It isn't the first time he says to Abraham or Jacob that you'll be fruitful and multiply. That he's told him that when he left.
Yeah, so El Shaddai actually means the name that you use when you're giving a blessing. Ask the guy by Roasters. You know the restaurant in Roasters?
I asked him. He
yeah.
said, ask the rabbi.
Oh, all right. Tell him it's when God uses that name whenever he does blessings. Paul? Yeah, that's a Rashi. Yeah, okay. if you look on the last source on the sheet, I brought that. So it says, "Thy name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel." And then we'll look at Rashi at what that means in a second.
This translation says, but also.
Oh, okay, yeah. Also, yeah, Chabad loves Rashi. I mean, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's lectures. He didn't lecture on the Torah. He lectured on Rashi. He said Rashi is your starting point. So. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think Esau, like Jacob, represents not just himself but a nation, and every nation has its, sort of governing angel, and I think this is the angel that represents Esau. That's a whole nother battle, actually. Edith was looking at one of the verses before class where it talks about that, when they come together and they finally kiss. Are they really kissing, or are they still battling? And this is, we did this class a different year, but there's this idea of that Esau always has this eternal hatred for Jacob. And this is the angel that represents that. So.
It just occurred to me is that everybody that has a Hebrew name, we're supposed to aspire. It occurred to me that everybody that has the Hebrew name. Sorry about that. We're supposed to aspire to our Hebrew name. So Jacob is then trying to aspire to be Israel.
You just go with that. That thing is annoying. Sorry. Jacob is aspiring to be Israel. Very nice. Beautiful. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. There's a long midrash that I want to get to. If you look on the back of the page, let's see if we need the rest of this. Okay, so I'm just going to read through it because I want to kind of explain it as I go. But what the midrash does here at the end, I just want to see if I need this other Rashi I brought. Sometimes I just put things on here to fill the page. Sometimes we need it. I shall admit you right to them. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah. But if you turn it on, then it'll make all kinds of terrible noises.
Oh, okay. So what I was going to say is, the fact that yashar in Hebrew means straight ahead or honest or integrity applies now to Israel.
Yes.
As opposed to when he was a trickster and was Jacob.
Yeah, and another nickname for Israel is Yeshurun, which comes from Yashar, which sometimes you see synagogues are called B'nai Jeshurun, or Jeshurun is Yeshurun. Right. Same word. Same word. Right. Okay, if you look at the midrash on the back of the page, the midrash is expanding the conversation that the angel has with Jacob. And from this expansive conversation that Jacob has with the angel, then we can try to learn what's really going on here, I think. Okay, so he said, "Release me." Okay, so the angel says to Jacob, "You have to let me go now." Now, do you remember why in the Torah the angel is so concerned that he needs to leave? Because it's alot hashachar, right? The sun's coming up. And his powers go away when the sun comes up. I explained this a little bit last night. If you were here, I was talking about, so the word in Hebrew, and they struggled. The angel comes and struggles with Jacob, and the word in Hebrew is vaya'avek, and they struggled. But avek can also mean dust. It does in modern Hebrew as well. And the rabbis pick up on that and say what the angel was trying to do was to kick up the dust to block Jacob's view. What was his view of? He was trying to get a view of the heavens. Because as long as he could get a view of the heavens, he knew why he really wanted to go to Israel. The reason he really wanted to go to Israel is because that's the place where you can live out the Torah and be connected to God. So then, what I was saying last night, and I did it very quickly so it's possible that you could have missed it, one of the other parts of this story is when he wrenches his sciatic nerve. So the sciatic nerve in Hebrew is a word called yerech. 3 Hebrew letters, Yud, Resh, Kaf. Okay. Now, why is Jacob? So there's this battle at night. What? Kaf yerech. Look what it says in Torah. Gid anasha is the nerve, but the part of his body that he wrenches is the kaf yerech. Yeah. What? Yeah, but Hebrew is kaf yerech. But it's true. It's true that the nerve actually is called the gid anasha. A gid is a sinew. Okay, so the Torah tells us later on that when Moses gets a look of when he's in the cleft of the rock and he gets a view of the heavens and he sees God's chair, it's this bluish turquoise color. And so Jacob's looking up to the sky and he's looking for this blue. And as long as he can keep a connection with that blue, he's in good shape. So the rabbis read into Kaf Yerech a Kabbalistic idea. That Yerech, Yud Resh Chaf, is actually an acronym that stands for 3 things that have to do with blue. Yud is Yam. What's Yam? Water, right? Resh is Rakia, which is the expanse that God created when he separated the sky from the water. And so Yerech means Rakia means the sky. And then the Kaf is Kiseh, the seat of God. Now, he could, as long as it was light out, as long as it was dark out, he couldn't see the water in the sky. He could only see the God's chair up above. So what the angel was trying to do was kick up the dust to try to block that so that he couldn't see it. Now, the word in Hebrew, kaf, anyone know what kaf means in Hebrew? It's like a palm, the kaf of your hand. A kapit is a spoon. Or kaf is also a spoon because it's shaped like a palm. Ironically, lashon is a tongue, is also a shoehorn. That's how Hebrew works. They're shaped, forget it. All right, so the palm, so he says kaf yerach, like the palm of your hip. So what the rabbis look at that and they say is kaf means palm, but it's also a Hebrew letter, kaf. Yud, resh, kaf. So what's he saying? You can't see the yud. You can't see the resh. Kaf yerach. You can see the kaf of yerach. Did you catch that? All right. I hate to do this on Shabbat because I prefer to text, but so I don't like to. There's 3 Hebrew letters in Yerech. Okay? Kaf is a word that means palm. It's also the name of this letter, ironically. So when the Torah says kaf yerach, it's not saying the palm of your hip. What even is a palm of your hip? What it's saying is the kaf of Yerech. You can see at night the kaf, which represents the sea, but you can't see the sky and the water. That's Kabbalah. Did you catch that? All right, if you didn't, if you get in, you got to go to Svat for 9 months, pay an exorbitant amount of money to live in a dump, and come back, and then ask me to explain what you learned there. But that's the Kabbalistic hint that is here. That's really cool. So what he's saying is the goal of the angel was to kick up the dirt so that you, Jacob, on your way to Israel, lose track of God and you forget why you're really going to Israel. So what did Jacob do? Now remember, when the angel, I explained this last night, but when the angel finds Jacob, Jacob's alone. Vayoter Yaakov. Yaakov's standing there by himself. So Rashi comes and says, why is he standing there by himself? Because he's with his whole family, but he forgot something, so he went back for it. What did he go back for? These jugs. What were in the jugs? Oil. What was the point of the oil? To make light. Why was he making light? Because it was at night, and he wanted to make sure that he could see. So that's why he had that oil. When do we read this story? The week of Hanukkah every year. Jacob was foreshadowing that later on in Jewish time, the Jews would also need to bring oil to banish the darkness of people trying to cover up the darkness of why the Jews are supposed to be in Israel in the first place, which is all the stuff that was done in the Holy Temple that the Maccabees purified. Jacob was predicting that. Okay, now, so that's what we have so far. That was last night's sermon. I know it's brilliant enough, but I've got more. No? Oh, yeah, kippah also, shaped like a, right, to cover. Okay. Okay, so let's read more. There's more here, though. There's more. This is an amazing midrash. So he says, at the time for my lauding, to laud the... Oh, so by the way, what does the angel say? I had a chance to beat you while it was dark. But you brought the light and you banished my dust. Now that the sun's up and it's all blue, I have no chance. I might as well leave. So he said, but there's another, so that's one reason the angel had to go, but there's another reason. So look what he said. As the time for my lauding, to laud the Holy One, blessed be he, has arrived. So the angel said, every morning when a new day starts, one of the jobs of the angels is to go and praise God, and I have to get back. They need me for the minyan. I need to get back up there. So I got to rush back. So Jacob said to him, line 2 of the Midrash, let your colleagues laud him. Jacob said, you don't think they have a minyan in heaven? You don't think they could find it? They have enough people. Don't worry about it. They'll be fine without you. This is the conversation going on between Jacob and the angel. So the angel said to Jacob, I cannot. As the next day I will come, and they'll say to me, just as you didn't show up yesterday, so don't show up today. So if I don't show up today, the other angels are going to say, oh, now you're here. You didn't need to come yesterday. So just like you didn't come yesterday, we don't need you today. Okay? It's like if you're in 6th grade and you miss a basketball practice at your school because you had to go, to the orthodontist. And the coach looks at you as if you've just destroyed 200 years of their program of basketball, and your son will never, ever play again because you missed practice. Not that happens in Miami. Okay. And so then, you email the coach is an anti-Semite, but how come every other kid who's now starting on the team is also Jewish except yours? Okay, so there's got to be a sitcom in there. Okay, so Jacob said, if you complete your... it's an amazing thing, whenever someone slights your kid and your immediate go-to is an anti-Semite, but every other kid who's being passed above you is also Jewish. So then you need to be more creative, right? Okay, all right. Okay, Jacob said, if you complete your task, you receive your reward. I will not release you unless you bless me. So Jacob said to him, those angels who came to Abraham So why does Jacob want the angel to bless him? Why does he think that that is a thing, that you get blessed? Because he knows the story of when the angels came to his grandfather Abraham and they said before they left him, you're going to have a son named Isaac. So he said, okay, what's my blessing? I know that that's a thing, that you bless us before you leave. So the angel is saying, yeah, but that angel's job who came to bless Abraham, that was his job. He was sent with that blessing. I wasn't sent here. I was sent for the wrestling match. Okay. So those angels who came to Abraham, they took their leave from him only with a blessing. He said to him, they were sent, this is the angel saying, they were sent only for that purpose. That was the angel's job. But I was not sent for that purpose, he said to him. If you complete your task, you receive your reward. I will not release you. So now the angel's got a real problem. Because he can't get back home, and Jacob is winning the wrestling match, which the angel never expected, that was possible. And the angel is preventing him from going back to bless God, and he's going to be kicked out of the minyan. And Jacob is forcing him to do something that he doesn't have the authority to do. He's not allowed to give a blessing. That's not why he's there. And if we look closely, we see he didn't give a blessing. He didn't say, I'm naming you Israel. Only God can do that. All I'm telling you is, and this was very clever of the angel, something good's going to happen to you later. Okay. So he tricked them a little bit. Okay. Rav Huna, one of the Hawaiian rabbis, yeah. So is this angel's name the Jacob angel? No, he was. Because yeah. Jacob is a trickster. Oh, okay. So yeah, not bad. Okay, so Rav Huna, ultimately he said, I will reveal it to him. If, in other words, the angel is saying, I'm going to let Jacob know what's going to happen in the future, that his name's going to be changed. If the Holy One, blessed be he, says to me, why did you reveal it to him? I will say before him. In other words, when I get back home and God says, who do you think you are? Why would you tell Jacob the future? I will say to God, master of the universe, your prophets issue decrees and you do not abrogate their decrees. Would I be able to abrogate their decree? He said to him, he's destined to reveal himself to you in Beit El and change your name, and I will be standing there. That is what is written. In Beit El he found him, and there he will speak. Okay, so in other words, the angel is just saying what Hosea is later going to tell the Jewish people anyway is going to happen, that this angel was going to be there when God changed his name. So what do we learn from this midrash? We learn from this midrash, I think, that the angel is going to tell him what the blessing is going to be. But what becomes very interesting about it is we now have a comparison between Jacob and Abraham, both getting blessings. And if you can, I heard this from a rabbi named Rabbi Chaim Bravender, a contemporary rabbi in Israel, putting this together. And here's how Bravender's take on it, which is just amazing. So here's what he says. When we meet Abraham, and he's now, living his life after Lech Lecha, he's in Israel. And the promise to the Jewish people is, we're going to be really two things. One, we're going to be the people of God, and two, we're going to have the land, meaning Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Those are the two promises, right? You'll inherit the land, and your children will be like the stars of the sky, the sands of the sea, whatever. Clear so far? Abraham has the land, but not the people. Jacob had the sons. Benjamin hasn't been born yet, but the other 11 have been born, and they're on their way back to Israel. Abraham had the land, but not the sons. Jacob had the sons, but not the land. You see the difference? Okay. Neither of them, as far as the angel knows, are yet Israel. And God is telling him, you're going to be Israel. But he says it in a way like, Okay, your name's now Israel. Jacob, come with me. Right? You caught that, right? We went through that a couple of times. Okay, and now from this point forward, you're Israel. Moses, write the next line, Jacob. That's what happens. So, okay, you're Israel, fine. Eternally, your people are going to be Israel. In other words, by telling you your people are going to be Israel, you just inherited the people of Israel. You're now the father of Israel. Abraham's not the father of Israel. You are. Jacob was. Right? We're not B'nai Avraham. We're B'nai Yisrael. Who's Yisrael? Jacob is changed to Israel. Abraham, it didn't work because Abraham's kids weren't all Jewish. Right? Because Ishmael didn't take. Isaac, it didn't work because Esau, it didn't take. Jacob, 12 sons, they're all Jewish, it took. Okay, so now Israel, Jacob now becomes the father of the Jewish people. However, he still doesn't have, nor does he ever have, what Abraham had. The ability to live out his life and die in Israel. So what does God give Jacob here? What's the blessing? What ultimately is the blessing? Why does he ultimately change his name? So it's a buildup. The angel introduces the concept, and then God comes and says, you're Israel. Right? You saw that? The angel says, Ye'amer, you're going to be called Israel. When does he tell him that? He tells Jacob that while Jacob is doing the fundamental thing that is the struggle and the tension of his life, which is the same thing that Herzl did. The struggle to bring the children of Israel into the land of Israel to live out their lives and be Zionists. That's the struggle of Jacob's life. Herzl died in many ways the same as Jacob. Look what happened to Herzl. Herzl spent the last years of his life trying to bring the Jewish people to the land of Israel, and he said at Basel in 1897, I founded the Jewish state. And 51 years later, 1948, the Jewish state was founded. But he died in 1904, and he was buried in Europe. But what did Israel do? They dug him up and reinterred him on a mountain named Mount Herzl. And he's buried there now. Jacob died in Egypt, dreaming of founding the Jewish state for his children. And the Jewish people dug him up and brought him back and buried him in the land of Israel. And Herzl relived, in some ways, Jacob's life. Herzl is the father of Zionism. But Jacob is the grandfather of Zionism. Jacob was the first one who said, my struggle is to be Israel. And so what happened was, Jacob didn't have what Abraham did, and he had what Abraham did. He didn't have the land, but he had the people. Herzl said, I got the people. They're living in the most miserable conditions in God-forsaken places, and I want to get them there. Hang on. Yes? Yes. Okay. So, Abraham had the place, but not the people. Jacob had the people, but not the place. And his whole life, even now when he's on the border going to fight Esau, and he's on the border of being back, it's only temporary. He's going to be kicked out again. He's going to end up in Egypt. He's going to be buried in Egypt. His people are going to die in the diaspora, and he's going to be furious about that, and he's going to be furious at Joseph, and he's going to be buried there, and he's going to make them promise to bring me back there. But here was the lesson, and here's the point. Jacob, in not having his dream fulfilled, to just after this 20 years of battling Esau and being able to go into the land of Israel and just living out his life, he now, when it says you will be called Israel, He is going to represent the struggle of the Jewish people for the rest of history, who are going to be kicked out and exiled of Israel and come back and be kicked out again and come back and have the world tell us we don't belong there and be fighting for it and be battling for it. And some of us live there and some of us don't live there and we're not quite settled there. All of that we today call Zionism is embedded in the word Israel, which means to strive for wholeness of being the Jewish people, to strive with God. And that's why after he gets the name, Jacob takes the name and he says, this place is now going to be called Peniel. This place is now going to be called the face of God, because here I'm seeing the relationship of the Jewish people with God from this point going forward. And so had we not had this story, you know who doesn't have Zionism? The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Jebusites, the Girgasites, the Amalekites, the Canaanites, the Amorites, the termites. Right. Listen closely. None of them had a Herzl. Because when they left, their story with the land of Israel was over. But for the Jewish people, from the moment we got kicked out, we started smashing glasses at weddings. We started saying L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim at Passover Seders. We started adding Seder Korbanot, these stories of all of the sacrifices into the prayers. And we started building into our mythology, into our methodology, into everything who we are. Without the land of Israel, there is no Jewish people. And that was the struggle of Jacob's life. And the reason he had to go through that is because this was going to be a struggle that was going to last forever until the Mashiach comes. And that's why we will be called Israel, Vayeamer, but in the future. But in the meantime, God still refers to us as Jacob. We're still the ones who are chasing what it means to get to the land of Israel. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
In the land. Wasn't Jacob in the land but for the famine, other than for Joseph?
What?
Wasn't Jacob and his 10 sons in the land?
At this point?
But for the famine, he wouldn't have left.
Yes, so they came,
Yeah, they came.
but not really so much but for the famine, but for the fact that the brothers sold Joseph into slavery.
So Joseph was the man.
In other words, we got Israel, God gave it to us, but like always, the Jewish people, the brothers, blew it with their sins, and we got kicked out. So their sin of selling Joseph is what ultimately brought us into diaspora in Egypt. Then we came back and built the temple.
We always did something.
Right. But then we sinned, so God kicked us out. Then we came back and built the second temple. We sinned and God kicked us out. And we've been fighting to get back ever since. That's the struggle. But without Jacob, we would have given up on the struggle and said we could just live in Boca. And we said, no. We have to have Israel.